The screams had already vanished by the time he reached the ridge, leaving behind only the echo of panic tangled with the wind. Smoke curled upward from a dying fire in the valley, and the earth smelled of ash and iron. The cowboy reined in his horse, chest heaving, his breath catching sharp against the cold. He didn't know why he'd come, curiosity, maybe guilt, but something had pulled him from the saloon before dawn, as if the horizon itself had whispered his name. He had no kindness left to give the world, but trouble always seemed to find him first. Below he saw them. 2 women, bound to a splintered fence post in the wide open field, the morning frost clinging to their hair. They sat still, silent, proud even in ruin. The ropes around their wrists bit red into skin pale from cold. Their long braids rested over their shoulders, heavy and dark, catching flecks of light like threads of midnight. He thought, at first, they were dead. The thought struck him harder than he expected. He dismounted without thinking, boots sinking into the half-frozen earth. The closer he came, the quieter the world grew. No birds, no river. Only the sound of his own heartbeat, steady and foreign. One woman stirred. She raised her head slowly, eyes unfocused, lips cracked from cold. Her gaze found him, sharp, assessing, untrusting. She was older than the other, maybe 28, face shaped by resilience more than beauty, though beauty clung stubbornly there all the same. The second woman sat beside her, slumped forward, breathing shallow. He crouched, knife in hand, cutting through the coarse rope. The women didn't thank him, didn't plead. They just watched. When the last rope fell away, he saw the bruises along their arms, the dust and blood dried against their skin. Pioneer men had done this. He didn't need to ask why. The West was full of men who mistook cruelty for order. He spoke finally, his voice rough from disuse. "You can stand." The older one nodded, slow, defiant. The younger swayed, nearly fell. He caught her elbow on instinct, and she tensed, fear flashing like lightning, but didn't pull away. Her skin was cold as stone. For a moment, he wanted to say something human, something soft, but the words withered on his tongue. He turned instead toward his horse. "Come on then. I can't stay here." They followed, barefoot, through brittle grass and thin snow. The sun began its crawl across the sky, turning the field gold and silver. The cowboy didn't look back, but he could feel their eyes on him, measuring, questioning, waiting for cruelty that didn't come. By noon, the small cabin came into view, half hidden against the hills. He opened the door, gesturing for them to enter. The room was plain, wood, smoke, and silence. He built a fire, fetched water from the barrel, and handed them tin cups. They sat near the hearth, the younger woman shivering uncontrollably, the elder watching him with the wary focus of a wounded animal unsure if it was safe to rest. He ate in silence, but every so often his eyes flicked toward them. The one in the burgundy dress. She never looked away. She was studying him the way he studied the land, trying to read what could not be spoken. Her presence stirred something old in him, something he'd buried under whiskey and years of pride. He hated that feeling. It made him feel unguarded. As night fell, the wind howled against the cabin walls. The firelight painted soft amber across their faces. The younger woman, blue dress, eyes like dusk, dozed at last, her head resting against her sister's shoulder. The older one remained still, awake, her fingers brushing the turquoise beads around her neck, as if counting memories to stay sane. The cowboy poured himself another drink and muttered under his breath, "Should have kept riding." But his voice broke on the last word, thin and uncertain. He told himself he didn't care who they were or what had happened. He told himself he'd send them on their way come morning. Yet, when the younger woman stirred in her sleep and whispered something in her language, soft, melodic, full of ache, he found himself listening. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying a sound faint and distant. Hooves, perhaps, or ghosts of the men who'd done this. He set his glass down slowly, every muscle tightening. The older woman's gaze met his, clear and fierce in the flickering light. No words passed, but something unspoken did, an understanding that danger was not finished with them yet. He rose, crossed the window, and peered into the dark. Snow drifted in lazy spirals under the moon. Nothing moved. Still, he felt it, the way animals feel the tremor before the storm. Behind him, the older woman's voice came at last, quiet and low, rough from days without water. They'll come back. The cowboy turned toward her, the fire snapping between them, shadows cutting across his face. For the first time in years, he didn't have an answer ready. Only the sudden, steady realization that saving them had tied him to something larger than mercy, something that might break him open again. And outside, somewhere in that pale darkness, a horse screamed. The gunshot tore through the stillness before dawn, shattering the fragile peace they had built. The cowboy jolted upright, heart thundering, blood roaring in his ears. Smoke hung in the cold air outside the cabin, drifting like breath from the earth itself. He grabbed his rifle, eyes narrowing, every instinct waking sharp and raw. The women were already awake. He could hear them breathing in the dark. The younger one clutched her sister's hand, whispering something steady, rhythmic, like a prayer against panic. He didn't know the words, but he felt their weight. Fear had returned to claim what it had left behind. He stepped onto the porch, boots creaking against the old wood, and stared into the gray morning. For riders waited at the edge of the field, their shapes ghostly against the snow, steam rising from their horses. He knew the kind. Pioneers turned hunters, drunk on the power of ownership. They had the same eyes he once carried, cold, convinced. The leader called out, his voice cracking across the field. "You've got something that don't belong to you." The cowboy didn't answer. He lowered the rifle just enough to show he was ready to use it. Behind him, he could hear movement, the older woman stepping close to the door, the faint sound of fabric shifting. She wasn't hiding. She was waiting. The riders laughed, the sound brittle as frost. The leader spat into the snow. "You think saving them makes you some kind of saint?" The cowboy's voice came low even. "I don't believe in saints." The first bullet came quick, biting into the porch post. He ducked, returned fire, the rifle kicking hard into his shoulder. The echo rolled down the valley, startling crows into flight. For a few seconds, the world dissolved into smoke and thunder. When the noise faded, two riders were gone, either dead or fled. The others regrouped, circling. He reloaded, teeth clenched against the pain blooming down his arm. Then another shot, a flash of agony, tore through his shoulder. He dropped to one knee, blood warm against the cold air. The door burst open behind him. The older woman stepped out, face fierce and still, eyes like burning glass. She lifted the fallen rifle beside him, hands steady despite the tremor in her breath. The younger one appeared next, clutching a hatchet she could barely lift. They stood together, unyielding against the storm of violence rolling toward them. He wanted to shout for them to go back inside, but the sight of them standing in the open struck something deeper than fear. Pride, awe, a kind of helpless respect. The rude man the world knew would have cursed them, but this version of him, the one built in the quiet nights of shared survival, could only watch. The remaining rider charged. The older woman fired. The shot cracked clean through the morning, echoing across the empty land. The horse reared, its rider tumbling to the snow. Silence fell again, sharp and final. Only the wind spoke, carrying the faint rattle of branches like applause from unseen spirits. The cowboy sank against the wall, breath shallow, hand pressed over the wound. The women knelt beside him, faces streaked with ash and sweat. The younger one tore a strip from her dress and pressed it against his shoulder. Her touch was firm, unflinching. The older woman met his gaze, no fear, no triumph, only an understanding carved from the same ache. "You should have let them go," he muttered, voice fading. The older one shook her head. "We already did, once." He didn't ask what she meant. The answer lived between them, in the way her voice cracked at the edges, and the way the younger woman's hand trembled when she tied the knot around his wound. They'd lost something before, something no rescue could return. Hours passed. The snow thickened, blanketing the field, covering the bodies until the land looked clean again. The fire inside the cabin burned low, its light soft and forgiving. The women sat near him, quiet, keeping watch. He drifted in and out of fever dreams, memories of his own sins rising like ghosts. Faces he'd forgotten, promises he'd broken. He saw his younger self, cruel and careless, leaving others to the cold. Maybe this was the price of redemption, to bleed for what you once ignored. When he woke, night had fallen. The storm had passed. The women were still there, one sleeping, the other tending the fire. His shoulder ached, but his heart felt startlingly alive. He realized, with a clarity that stung, that saving them had saved something inside him too. He shifted, wincing, and the older woman looked up. Her eyes softened, and for the first time he saw something like forgiveness there, not for him alone, but for the world that had hurt them all. Outside, somewhere beyond the cabin walls, the faint sound of another horse drifted through the dark. It was distant, patient, waiting. The cowboy reached for his rifle, hand trembling. The older woman met his gaze, her voice low, certain. "They'll come again." He nodded, feeling the truth settle heavy in his chest. This wasn't the end. It was the breath before it.